I didn't know my marriage was about to end at a house party. It was supposed to be nothing. A casual Saturday night at Jake and Lisa's place. 20 people, background music, cheap wine, familiar laughter. The kind of gathering you don't remember the next morning. I was leaning against the kitchen counter, a beer sweating in my hand, half listening to a conversation about last weekend's football game. Across the room, my husband Ethan was with his usual circle, laughing a little too loudly, his third glass of wine already empty. Every few minutes, I caught him looking at me. That look. The one he gets when he thinks he's about to do something clever, something bold, something that makes my stomach tighten before my mind can explain why. Then he stood up. "Hey everyone," Ethan said brightly. "Can I get your attention for a second?" The music cut off. Conversations died mid-sentence. 20 faces turned toward him. He smiled, wide, confident, almost theatrical. "I just want to make a quick announcement," he said. "So everyone's clear. We're in an open relationship now." Silence. Not the comfortable kind. The kind that presses against your ears. Every eye in that room slid toward me. I understood immediately what he wanted. Shock. Confusion. Embarrassment. He expected me to freeze, to stammer, to pull him aside and beg him to stop, because he'd been testing me for months. Little comments about how monogamy felt restrictive. Casual mentions of couples who were more evolved. Long work nights. A coworker named Marina, who somehow came up in conversation far too often. I set my beer down, calmly, looked straight at him. "As you wish." His smile flickered just for a second. Before he could recover, I turned to the man sitting on the couch beside me. Michael. Tall, self-assured, sharp in a way that cut through nonsense. Technically Ethan's friend. Practically the only person in the room who'd never been impressed by my husband's performances. "Michael," I said casually, "are you free this Saturday? I'd like to take you to dinner." He didn't hesitate, not even a breath. He looked up at me with a slow, dangerous smile. I can do everything better than him. The room exploded. Someone dropped a glass. Jake muttered, "Oh, damn." Lisa's jaw hit the floor. And Ethan? He froze. The grin vanished, replaced by pure panic. That was the moment I realized something important. He never wanted an open relationship. He wanted control. And for the first time in our marriage, I wasn't giving it to him. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 34, and for a long time, I thought I was the kind of woman who could make a marriage work through sheer effort, through patience, through compromise, through being the calm one when emotions got messy. I work as a project coordinator for a mid-sized logistics company. Nothing glamorous, but steady. My days are spreadsheets, deadlines, and putting out fires before they become disasters. I'm good at it because I've always been good at reading people, anticipating problems, smoothing tension before it ignites. I used to think that skill made me a good wife, too. I met Ethan 7 years ago at a friend of a friend barbecue. One of those summer evenings where everything smells like charcoal and citronella, and you talk to strangers like you've known them forever. He stood near the cooler, arguing playfully with Jake about which craft beer was overrated. He was charming in that effortless way, confident, quick with jokes, the kind of man who could walk into a room and immediately feel like he belonged there. When he noticed me watching, he smiled like he already knew I'd say yes to whatever he asked. And I did. He asked for my number that night, and within 2 weeks we were inseparable. Late dinners after work, spontaneous drives for ice cream, long talks where he made me feel like I was the most interesting person in the world. In the beginning, Ethan's intensity felt like devotion. He introduced me to his friend group quickly, Jake and Lisa first, because Jake was like a brother to him. Then the rest, game nights, birthday dinners, trips that looked perfect on social media. People liked Ethan. People gravitated toward him. When he laughed, everyone laughed. When he spoke, people listened. And I liked that my life suddenly had a built-in community. There were no kids, by choice, mostly timing. We always said, not yet. We wanted stability first. We wanted to travel. We wanted to be smart about money. We rented a place together, kept our finances mostly separate, and told ourselves we were being mature and modern. Looking back, I realized we were also keeping an escape hatch open without admitting it. After we got married, the first couple of years were fine. Not the movie kind of love, but comfortable, predictable. We had routines: Saturday groceries, Sunday laundry, dinner on the couch while he scrolled through his phone and I answered work emails I shouldn't have been answering. And I told myself that was adulthood. Then something shifted, not all at once, not in a dramatic before and after way. It happened quietly, like water seeping into a wall, until one day the paint bubbles and you realize the damage has been happening for months. Ethan started making little comments about other couples, about how some people didn't cling so tightly to rules, about how relationships could be more exciting if you weren't so traditional. He said it like he was being enlightened, like he was doing me a favor by expanding my mind. At first I laughed it off. Ethan liked to provoke. He liked to poke at people just to see them react. It was part of his personality, this constant need to feel like he could control the temperature in a room. But the comments didn't stop. They became a theme. And the more he said them, the more I started noticing everything else. The way he guarded his phone, the way he'd suddenly become vague about work, the way he'd mention Marina, a woman from his office, in that overly casual tone people use when they're trying too hard not to sound guilty. Marina says this restaurant is amazing. Marina thinks my boss is clueless. Marina and I were talking about how some couples just don't evolve. I remember one night in particular, me washing dishes, him leaning against the counter, wine in his hand, watching me like I was part of the furniture. "You ever think we're too safe?" he asked. I turned off the faucet, hands dripping. "Safe isn't a bad thing," I said. He smiled like I'd answered wrong. That smile, bright, amused, slightly superior, started showing up more often than the warm one I married. And the strangest part? Around other people, Ethan became even more performative. Louder jokes, bigger stories, the charming husband everyone loved. Meanwhile, in private, he was distant, critical in small ways that were easy to dismiss if you didn't want to admit what they meant. I kept telling myself it was a phase. Work stress, restlessness, normal marriage stuff. I didn't want to be the woman who overreacted. I didn't want to be paranoid. I didn't want to turn my home into a courtroom where everything required evidence. So I stayed quiet. I adjusted. I tried harder. And that's what makes what happened at Jake and Lisa's party feel even sharper in my memory. Because when Ethan stood up with that grin, when he announced our marriage was open, like it was a funny little upgrade he'd decided on, it wasn't spontaneous. It was the culmination of every small boundary he'd been pushing, waiting to see when I'd finally break. And for once, I didn't. After that night, I couldn't stop replaying the months leading up to it. Not in a dramatic, self-punishing way, but with a clarity that felt almost cruel. It was like finally turning on a light in a room I'd been stumbling through in the dark, convincing myself the furniture kept moving on its own. Ethan didn't become difficult overnight. He became subtly dismissive. It started with jokes that landed just a little too close to home. "You're such a planner," he'd say, laughing, whenever I asked about schedules or finances. "Ever think about just letting things happen?" At dinner parties, he'd tell stories where I was the punchline, how I'd triple-check reservations, how I worried too much, how I overthought everything. Everyone laughed. I smiled along because pushing back would have made me look uptight. But inside, something small and sharp would lodge itself in my chest. Then came the comparisons. He'd talk about other couples, always in that hypothetical tone that let him deny everything later. Marcus and Jenna don't really believe in labels. Chris and his wife say jealousy is just insecurity. Some people just aren't built for monogamy. It's kind of outdated, don't you think? He never said we should be different. He just made it sound like I was. At home, he became harder to reach. Conversations felt like walking through fog. Every time I tried to talk about how distant he seemed, he'd redirect. "You're reading too much into it. Why are you making this a big deal? Can't we just have a normal night without analyzing everything? Normal to him meant silence when it suited him. And whenever I tried to set even the smallest boundary, he'd flip the script. Once, when I asked why he'd been texting Marina so late at night, he laughed. Actually laughed. "You're not jealous, are you?" he asked, eyes gleaming. That's not very evolved. The word evolved became his shield. If I questioned him, I was insecure. If I asked for reassurance, I was controlling. If I expressed discomfort, I was old-fashioned. And somehow, I found myself apologizing for feelings he'd provoked. The worst part wasn't the distance. It was how deliberate everything felt in hindsight. Ethan liked control, but not in obvious ways. He didn't shout. He didn't issue ultimatums. He nudged. He tested. He'd cross a line just enough to see if I noticed, then smile when I let it slide. And other people started noticing before I did. Jake pulled me aside once while Ethan was refilling drinks. "You okay?" he asked quietly. "You seem tense lately." "I'm fine," I said automatically. Jake didn't look convinced. Lisa stopped inviting us to certain gatherings. Never directly, never explained. Just fewer texts, fewer group plans. When I finally asked her about it, she hesitated. "Ethan can be a lot sometimes," she said carefully. "You know that." I did know. I just hadn't wanted to admit how much. Then there was Michael. He'd always been observant, quieter than the rest, watching instead of performing. At gatherings, he'd check in with me. Not in a flirty way, not even obvious, just small things. "You good? Want to sit for a minute?" That was kind of out of line. Once, after Ethan made a joke about me being married to spreadsheets, Michael met my eyes across the room and raised an eyebrow. That look said everything Ethan wouldn't. I ignored it then. I told myself not to read into it, because reading into things meant facing them. And facing them meant accepting that my marriage wasn't just drifting. It was being steered somewhere I hadn't agreed to go. The party wasn't the beginning of the conflict. It was just the moment Ethan finally stopped pretending I had a choice. And what he didn't realize, what he never considered, was that I'd been paying attention all along, even when I stayed quiet, especially when I stayed quiet. The moment Ethan stood up at that party didn't feel sudden. It felt inevitable. I remember the exact second it happened, the way the room seemed to tilt slightly, like my body knew before my mind caught up. His chair scraped softly against the floor. Glasses clinked. Someone laughed, thinking he was about to make a toast. He wasn't drunk enough to be careless. That's what stayed with me. He'd had wine, yes, but not enough to blur judgment, not enough to erase intention. His eyes were clear when he spoke. His posture was confident. He wanted this moment to land. "I just want to make a quick announcement," he said, smiling like the center of gravity belonged to him. "So everyone's clear. We're in an open relationship now." For half a second, I wondered if I'd misheard. Then the silence told me I hadn't. I felt heat crawl up my neck. Not embarrassment, something sharper. Awareness. 20 sets of eyes slid toward me, some wide with shock, others already anticipating drama. Ethan didn't look at me right away. That was the tell. He looked around the room, soaking in the reaction, enjoying the tension he'd created, before finally turning his head, slowly, to see what I'd do. He expected a scene. He expected me to scramble, to whisper, to pull him aside and beg him not to humiliate us like this. Because humiliation was the point. I took a breath. Not deep. Just enough. Set my beer down carefully on the counter because I didn't trust my hands not to shake if I held it any longer. Then I looked straight at him. "As you wish." It came out calm, almost neutral. The room reacted before he did. Murmurs, shifting weight, someone clearing their throat. Ethan's smile faltered, just for a beat, like a glitch in a performance. He recovered quickly. "Wait, Emily, I didn't let him finish. I turned to Michael, sitting to my right on the couch, one arm draped casually over the back, watching everything unfold with quiet interest. "Michael," I said, keeping my voice steady, "are you free this Saturday? I'd like to take you to dinner." For a heartbeat, the room froze. Michael didn't hesitate. He looked up at me, eyes sharp, and smiled. Not polite, not uncertain, confident, deliberate. I can do everything better than him. The effect was immediate and explosive. A glass shattered near the sink. Jake swore under his breath. Lisa's hand flew to her mouth. And Ethan? He went completely still. The grin drained from his face like someone had pulled a plug. His mouth opened slightly, then closed. His eyes darted around the room, searching for what? Support? Control? A rewind button? What are you doing? He finally stammered. I met his gaze. Accepting your terms. Michael stood up, still smiling, unbothered by the chaos. Saturday works for me. I know a great Italian place downtown. No, wait, this isn't what I meant, Ethan said quickly, panic bleeding into his voice now. Emily, I was joking. You announced it, I replied evenly, in front of everyone, 20 witnesses. You meant it. Ethan looked around desperately. No one came to his rescue. Some people stared into their drinks. Others looked between us, barely hiding smiles. A few exchanged glances that said, finally. Michael grabbed his jacket. I should probably head out. This got interesting fast. He looked at me. Text me the details. I will. He walked past Ethan without acknowledging him and headed for the door. Thanks for the party, Jake, Michael called over his shoulder. Always memorable. The door closed behind him. Ethan was still standing in the middle of the room, cycling through emotions too fast to mask. Shock, anger, disbelief, fear. Can we talk outside? He asked finally, voice tight. Sure. The driveway was cool and quiet, the noise of the party muffled behind us. The moment we were out of earshot, he grabbed my arm. What the hell was that? He hissed. You're actually going to go out with him? You announced we have an open relationship, I said calmly, pulling my arm free. So yes. I was joking, he snapped. I just wanted to see how you'd react. There it was. The truth, slipping out without ceremony. You wanted to test me, I said. You wanted to embarrass me, see if I'd beg. Or maybe you wanted an excuse to do something you've already been planning. His eyes widened. That's not... Save it, I said quietly. We both know what's been happening. The late nights, Marina, the hints. You've been building up to this. He had no denial left. You don't get to change the rules now, I continued. You wanted an open relationship? Fine, but it goes both ways. This is insane, he said, running his hands through his hair. No, I replied. What's insane is announcing something like that without talking to your wife first. I turned back toward the house. Behind me, the party was already dissolving. Guests leaving early, laughter fading into awkward goodbyes. And as I grabbed my keys and drove home alone, one thought settled heavy and clear in my chest. He didn't miscalculate by opening the marriage. He miscalculated by assuming I wouldn't take him at his word. The house was silent when I got home. Not the peaceful kind. No hum of conversation, no familiar rhythm of shared space. Just the low buzz of the refrigerator and the sound of my own breathing, louder than it should have been. I sat on the couch and stared at the blank television screen, replaying the night in fragments. Ethan's face when Michael accepted, the way his confidence collapsed into panic. The drive home, streetlights flashing past like punctuation marks on a sentence that had already been written. I didn't feel victorious. I felt hollow. That surprised me. I'd imagined that standing my ground would feel empowering, like some dramatic shift where everything suddenly made sense. Instead, it felt like the aftermath of a storm, quiet, disorienting, full of debris I hadn't yet figured out how to clear. I asked myself the questions I'd avoided for months. When did this start? How long had I been shrinking to keep things stable? How many moments like tonight had I brushed off because confronting them felt harder than enduring them? My phone buzzed. A text from Michael. Just so you know, I meant what I said. Saturday sounds great. And honestly, she had that coming. Someone needed to call his bluff. I smiled, just a little. Saturday at 7, I typed back. I'll pick you up. Looking forward to it. I set the phone down before I could overthink what that meant. Ethan came home around midnight. I heard his car pull into the driveway. The front door opened, closed. His footsteps slowed when he saw me on the couch, still in the same spot, watching nothing. "We need to talk," he said, dropping his keys on the counter. "Go ahead." He sat across from me, trying to look composed, failing. His makeup-free face, so careful earlier, now showed the cracks. Red eyes, smudged confidence. "What happened tonight was out of line," he said. "You embarrassed me." I almost laughed. "I embarrassed you?" I repeated. "That's interesting." "I was making a comment," he insisted. "You turned it into a spectacle." "You announced our marriage was open," I said evenly. "That's not a comment. That's a declaration." I was tipsy. "You'd had 3 glasses of wine over 2 hours. You knew exactly what you were doing." He shifted, then softened his tone. His favorite pivot. "Baby, please, can we just forget this happened? I made a mistake." "No." The word surprised even me with how easily it came. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean, no, we're not pretending this didn't happen." His face hardened. "So you're actually going through with this? You're going to see Michael?" "Yes. He's my friend." "Was," I said. "Pretty sure that ended the moment he said he could do everything better than you." That struck a nerve. "You're being cruel," Ethan snapped. "I'm being honest," I replied, "something you seem to struggle with." He stood and paced, agitation radiating off him. "You can't just start dating other people because of one stupid thing I said at a party. Watch me. I'll tell everyone you're having an affair." I turned off the TV and looked straight at him. "Go ahead. Tell them about the affair I have permission to have." He froze. The trap snapped shut. "Here's what I think really happened," I continued, standing up. "You've been testing me for months, pushing boundaries. You wanted permission to cross a line without consequences. That's not... Don't lie to me. Not now." Silence stretched between us. Finally, he broke. "Fine, yes. Marina and I have gotten close, but nothing happened. Yet," I said quietly. He dropped into the chair, deflated. "I was trying to be honest." "You were trying to control the narrative." He looked at me like he didn't recognize me anymore. "So what now?" he asked. "You're throwing away 7 years over one fight?" "This isn't one fight," I said. "This is months of disrespect." I grabbed my phone and headed toward the bedroom. "I'm going to sleep. We can talk tomorrow if you want, but my answer isn't changing." "Where do I sleep?" he asked. "Guest room or couch," I said. "Your choice." I locked the bedroom door, not out of fear, but out of necessity. My phone buzzed again. "Everyone noticed," Michael texted. "You standing up for yourself was overdue." I stared at that message for a long time. Everyone noticed. Of course they did. I'd been so busy trying to be the good wife that I hadn't realized how visible the imbalance had become. I typed back, "Thanks. I needed to hear that." I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, heart finally slowing. For the first time in months, I wasn't trying to fix anything. I was just letting the truth sit where it belonged. The next morning, Ethan tried a different approach. Breakfast. I woke up to the smell of coffee and toast, an old tactic, one he hadn't bothered with in months. When I stepped into the kitchen, he was standing at the stove, sleeves rolled up, moving with deliberate care, like he was auditioning for a version of himself he thought I missed. "Morning," he said softly. I nodded and sat at the table. He placed a plate in front of me just the way I liked it. "Thank you," I said, because manners still mattered to me, even when the relationship didn't. He watched me eat, waiting. Finally, he smiled, tentative, hopeful. "So," he said, "we good?" I looked up at him. "No." The word landed heavier than I expected. His smile faltered. "Emily, come on. Last night got out of hand. We don't have to blow this up." "You already did." He sighed, frustration creeping in. "I told you, I wasn't thinking clearly." "You were thinking clearly enough to announce it to a room full of people." He changed tactics again. "I'm sorry," he said, voice softening. "I really am. Can we just reset?" I finished my coffee and stood. "I'm going to work." "Emily." "I don't have anything new to say," I replied, "and I'm not going to argue in circles." He called me 6 times that day. I let every call go to voicemail. By the time I got home that evening, his patience had burned away. "This silent treatment is childish," he snapped as soon as I walked in. "I'm not giving you the silent treatment," I said calmly. "I've just already said what needs to be said." "So that's it?" he demanded. You're really doing this? Yes. He laughed sharply. Fine, then I'm going out Friday night. I paused. He was watching me closely, waiting for jealousy, anger, something. Have fun, I said, heading to the kitchen. That stopped him cold. You don't even care? He asked, following me. You announced we're open, I said, chopping vegetables. What you do with your time is your business. He stared at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. You're calling my bluff. No, I replied. You're realizing you don't have one. Friday came. Ethan dressed up, spent nearly 2 hours on his hair and outfit. He left around 8 without a word. I ordered pizza, watched a movie, and went to bed early. He came home before midnight. I heard him crying in the guest room. Saturday morning, I went to the gym. When I returned, he was sitting at the kitchen table with a mug of coffee, eyes hollow. I didn't go through with it, he said quietly. I met Marina for drinks, but I realized I didn't want this. Okay, I said, pouring myself coffee. That's it? He asked. You're not going to say anything? What do you want me to say? I replied. Congratulations for not cheating. I want you to cancel your dinner with Michael. I met his eyes. Not happening. Why? He demanded. If I didn't go through with mine, because this isn't about Marina, I said. This is about respect. He looked down. At 6:30, I got ready. I wore the blouse Ethan used to complain was too nice for normal dinners. I liked the irony. When I came out, he was on the couch, arms crossed. Have a good time, he muttered. Thanks. Don't wait up. The drive to Michael's place felt light. No tension, no rehearsed arguments, just music and space to breathe. Michael answered the door. Confident, without effort. Right on time, he said with a smile. Dinner was easy. We talked about work, bad weather, Jake's chaotic parties. No games, no power struggles. So, he asked over dessert, are you trying to save the marriage? I don't know yet, I admitted, but I know I can't keep pretending everything's fine. He nodded. That's honest. On the drive home, he said, once you see how you deserve to be treated, you won't be able to unsee it. He was right. When I got home, Ethan was waiting. One look at my face and his shoulders sagged. You had a good time, he said. Yes. With him? Yes. So what now? He asked quietly. I don't know, I said, but we're not okay. That night, lying in bed alone, my phone buzzed. You okay? Michael texted. Yeah, I replied. I think I finally am. And that was the moment I realized. The chaos wasn't coming from my decision. It was coming from his loss of control. The quiet didn't last. It never does. By Monday morning, my phone was vibrating nonstop. Missed calls, long texts, voice messages that swung wildly between apology and accusation. Ethan's emotions had turned into a storm system, unpredictable and loud, and I was standing directly in its path, whether I liked it or not. At work, I stared at my screen without absorbing anything. Numbers blurred. Emails went unanswered. Every few minutes, my phone lit up again. We need to talk. This is serious. You're tearing our life apart. I took my lunch break in my car just to breathe. By the time I got home that evening, Ethan was already there, sitting at the dining table with his laptop open, papers spread out like evidence in a trial he was determined to win. Sit down, he said. I didn't like the tone, but I sat. I've been going through our finances, he began. If we're really doing this open relationship thing, we need boundaries, ground rules. I stared at him. Now you want rules? I asked quietly. After announcing it to everyone without asking me, I'm trying to fix this, he snapped. I'm trying to make it work. No, I said. You're trying to control the damage because it didn't go the way you planned. He slammed his hand on the table. Stop acting like you're the victim here. You're the one who went out with my friend. I went to dinner with someone who treats me with respect, I replied. You've been emotionally invested in Marina for months. Nothing happened, he shot back. Nothing happened yet, I said, and that's the point. He stood, pacing now. Fine. You want the truth? Yes, there's chemistry. I thought opening things up would help us. That's your version of saving our marriage? I asked. Public humiliation? He grabbed his phone, scrolling frantically. Look, I found a therapist who specializes in non-traditional relationships. We can talk to someone. I didn't hesitate. I don't want to make this work. The words hung between us, heavy and irreversible. His face drained of color. What? I don't want to make this work, I repeated. Not like this. Not anymore. You're giving up, he accused. Just like that? This has been building for years, I said. We've been coasting, pretending everything's fine. You made that announcement because some part of you wanted out, but you wanted me to be the one to beg. That's not true, he said weakly. Then tell me why you did it. He opened his mouth, closed it. Nothing came out. That was the moment something inside me broke. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a clean snap, like finally letting go of a rope I'd been holding too tight for too long. I'm going to talk to a lawyer, I said. He laughed, sharp and disbelieving. You can't be serious. I am. The next morning, I called in sick and drove across town with shaking hands. The attorney's office smelled like coffee and paper. She listened without interrupting, asked practical questions, took notes. No kids. Separate savings. Rental lease ending in 3 months. This will be straightforward, she said, and somehow that was comforting. When I got home, Ethan's car wasn't there. I started sorting through drawers. What was mine? What was his? It was startling how little we actually shared. He came back that night with takeout. We ate in silence. I talked to Michael today, he said finally. My chest tightened. Okay. He told me we're not friends anymore. Said I've been a terrible friend for years. Said everyone's noticed how I treat people. I didn't respond. Is that really what everyone thinks of me? He asked, voice cracking. Yes, I said softly. It is. He looked at me like I'd hit him. I talked to a lawyer today, I added. The color drained from his face. You did what? I filed the initial paperwork, I said. We're getting divorced. The chair scraped back violently as he stood. You can't just decide that. I met his eyes. You did, at a party. He had no answer. That night, I slept in the guest room, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling, my heart heavy but strangely calm. 1 week ago, I was at a party. Now, my marriage was over. And in the quiet darkness, at my lowest point, one truth finally settled in. I wasn't afraid of being alone. I was afraid of staying. The strangest thing about deciding to leave is how quiet it feels afterward. No fireworks, no instant relief, just a steady, grounding sense that something irreversible has already been set in motion. The morning after I told Ethan about the lawyer, I woke up before my alarm. The house felt different, not hostile, not tense, just detached. Like a place I was already in the process of leaving, even though my things were still here. Ethan didn't speak to me over breakfast. He hovered instead, opening cabinets, closing them again, making coffee he didn't drink. I recognized the behavior immediately. It was the same restless energy he used whenever he realized he'd miscalculated and didn't know how to regain control. On my drive to work, my phone buzzed. A text from Jake. Hey, just a heads up. Ethan called Natalie last night. Total meltdown. Said Michael is trying to steal you. Figured you should know. I let out a slow breath at a red light. Thanks, I typed back. I appreciate the warning. At work, I was finally able to focus again. Not because things were resolved, but because my mind wasn't split in half anymore. There was grief, yes. There was anger. But there was also clarity. That afternoon, another message came in. This one from Lisa. I've wanted to say something for a long time. I'm sorry I didn't. You didn't deserve how he treated you. Then another. Then another. People I hadn't spoken to privately in years, friends, acquaintances, even someone from Ethan's side, reaching out quietly, cautiously, like they were afraid to confirm what they already knew. Everyone noticed. That sentence echoed again. That night, Ethan tried one last time. He sat across from me at the table, eyes red, voice softer than I'd heard in months. I can change, he said. I understand now what I did wrong. I looked at him carefully, not with anger, not with hope, with distance. Maybe you can, I said, but not for me. His face crumpled. I can be the husband you deserve. That's the problem, I replied gently. You never tried to be, until you thought you were losing me. He had no answer. 2 days later, I met Michael for coffee. Not a date. Not even close. Just two people sitting across from each other in a quiet cafe. Sunlight streaming through the windows. "How are you holding up?" he asked. "Better than I expected," I said honestly. "Harder than I hoped." He nodded. "That makes sense." "She's telling people I abandoned her," I added, "that I gave up without trying." Michael snorted softly. "Anyone who was at that party knows the truth." I hesitated. "There's something you should know about Marina." His expression sharpened. "What about her?" "She rejected him," he said calmly. "Weeks ago. Hard no. He didn't want an open relationship. He wanted validation after being turned down." The pieces slid into place with brutal clarity. The timing, the announcement, the desperation when I didn't react the way he'd planned. It had never been about freedom. It had been about ego. "Thank you," I said quietly. "For what?" "For telling me the truth when I needed it." That night, lying in bed, I felt something shift. Not grief lifting, not pain disappearing, but power returning. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was choosing. And once you realize you have a choice, once you really understand it, you can't go back to pretending you don't. The fallout didn't arrive all at once. It rolled in slowly, methodically, like consequences usually do when no one is rushing to save you anymore. Ethan tried every version of damage control he knew. First, he went public. He started telling people I'd changed, that I'd become distant, cold, unreasonable, that I'd thrown away our marriage over one misunderstanding. He framed himself as confused, heartbroken, blindsided. The problem was, too many people had been in that room. The story didn't hold. Jake stopped answering his calls. Lisa sent him one message, short, polite, final, telling him she needed space and that what he'd done at the party wasn't okay. Other friends followed quietly. Group chats went silent. Invitations stopped coming. Ethan had built his social world on performance. Once the performance cracked, there was nothing underneath to hold it together. His family didn't rush in the way he'd expected either. His sister called me one afternoon. We hadn't spoken in years beyond birthdays and holidays. "I just wanted you to know," she said carefully. "I'm sorry. This isn't surprising. He's always needed to feel admired." That was all she said. It was enough. At home, Ethan oscillated between anger and resignation. One night, he accused me of enjoying his downfall. "I'm not enjoying anything," I said quietly. "I'm just done managing your image." He didn't argue with that. The divorce moved faster than either of us expected. No children, minimal shared assets, separate savings, clean lines. The attorney called it one of the smoothest cases she'd seen all year. Ethan tried one last manipulation a week before the papers were finalized. He showed up at my new place unannounced. Tears, apologies, promises. "I've changed," he sobbed. "I see it now. I can be better." I stood in the doorway and felt nothing. "Maybe you can," I said, "but not with me." He left without another word. The papers were signed 2 months after the party. I kept my car, my savings, my peace of mind. He kept his. We divided the furniture like adults who barely recognized each other anymore. That night, Michael texted me, "Congratulations on your freedom." "Drinks?" I smiled. "Absolutely." We met at a small bar downtown. Not a date, just two people closing a chapter. "So," he asked, raising his glass, "what now?" I clinked mine against his. Now I figure out who I am without someone constantly testing my worth. That's the best answer you could have given. Around us, life went on. Laughter, music, clinking glasses, normal things. And for the first time in years, normal felt good. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I was just free. The truth had done what revenge never could. It had spoken for itself. 2 months later, the divorce was final. No dramatic courtroom scene, no shouting. Just signatures on paper and a quiet acknowledgement that something had ended exactly when it should have. I moved into a smaller place, less space, fewer echoes. The first night there, I slept better than I had in years. No tension in the air, no unspoken rules, just silence that felt earned. Ethan faded from my daily life faster than I expected, not because I erased him, but because I stopped carrying him. I heard things through the social grapevine. His confidence had cracked. His charm didn't land the same. People had started seeing what I'd lived with quietly for years. I didn't correct the narrative. I didn't need to. Truth has a way of catching up when you stop running from it. Michael and I stayed friends. Sometimes we grabbed coffee, sometimes dinner. No pressure, no expectations. We laughed about small things, talked honestly about big ones. Maybe something would grow there someday. Maybe not. And for the first time in my adult life, I didn't feel the need to decide. What mattered was this. I learned that love doesn't require endurance. Respect isn't something you earn by staying quiet. And strength doesn't always look loud or dramatic. Sometimes it looks like sitting still while someone reveals exactly who they are. If there's one thing I'd tell anyone listening, pay attention when someone tests you instead of talking to you. Because people who love you don't need an audience to feel powerful. They don't humiliate you to feel important. And they don't mistake your patience for permission. I didn't leave because of one party. I left because in that moment, I finally saw the pattern clearly enough to stop pretending it wasn't there. That night didn't end my marriage. It revealed it. And once you see the truth, you don't unsee it.